Greetings, Internet, and welcome to Parsing John. Today we're going to take a look at Chapter 1, verses 22 and 23. Right here we've got the rubric, everything that we're looking for as we go through these passages, so you want to keep those in mind as we move forward. All right, let's get started. Epein un autoi tis e hina apokrisin domen tois pensasin hemas. Ti leges perise autu, efe, ego phone ontos en te eremoi euthante ten hodon kuriou kathos epein Hesaias ho prophetis. All right, there's our Greek for us. And let's go ahead and start identifying everything. So our very first word here, nice enough to us as it is a verb. We've got alpha nu there, which is a third person, and it is singular. This comes from the aorist stem. It is an active ending. There you go. And naturally, this word is indicative. We don't have any special clauses going on. And it means they said. All right. Un is, I'm going to say, a adverb, and it just means therefore. All right, and then here we've got autoi. This little sub iota tells us that this word is dative and singular, and it is masculine, or technically neuter, but we don't have anything in verse 21 or 20 that this could be referring back to as a neuter word, so it has to be masculine. It would be indirect object to him being John, and they would be the ones sent by the Jews from Jerusalem. All right, and then we have a question here. We know because we've got this semicolon. I'm going to put that in, and it is a direct quote. We don't know if it ends right there, so let's just leave it open for the moment. Tis is nominative, singular, masculine, or feminine, and it's going to be masculine because they're talking to a man. So, who, lama. And then this one is the second person singular form of Amy, and it is present, active, and indicative. And irregular verbs, you just have to memorize all the forms. There's no real pattern that we can follow. Who, are, and then we're going to include the word you, implied by our verb. Okay, then we enter our next clause. Not a verb, doesn't quite look like a normal verb. Domen here, that's our verb. We've got our men ending, which is first person, and it is plural. Take a look at the stem. If it were present, it would be did, but it's not. So we've got aorist here, and this omega tells us that it's subjunctive. Aorist, active, and subjunctive. Then we would write down we may give. So we've got some sort of subjunctive sentence here. And so in order to figure out what that is, we would want to go back to the beginning of this clause and see if there are any words that mark it. And we find hina, which tells us that it is a purpose clause in order that. Okay, we may give, and then we would want to give a accusative. It's a direct object. We take a look right here, and we have our accusative. It's not a normal looking accusative because it's got an iota there before the nu. So initially it looks a little bit like a dative, but it's not. It says accusative, and it is singular and feminine, I believe, and it just means answer. And then normally, if we have some accusative to give to something, we want to give it to an indirect object. And as we look ahead here, we've got tois, which is clearly dative, plural, and masculine or neuter. We can't tell for sure which one it is without a actual proper noun there. But we know that tois starts here. We've got seen right there, which is another dative, but it is from a participle. This is going to be dative and plural, and almost certainly masculine, because that would be in reference to the Jews who sent these guys out. So we're going to circle that one, X out the in. Pimps here is our stem, so it's either future or aorist, but this specific set of endings, or type of ending that we have here, tells us that it is going to be aorist, active, and a participle. Quite a lot to write down there. So then this would be to those having sent. And then, sorry, I was jumping ahead there. Hemos here is accusative and naturally plural, but it's a word that only appears in the plural form, and it just means us. This is the object of this participle. All right, so then our first bit here is, they said, therefore, missing E, oops, to him, who are you? In order that we may give answer, or an answer, to those having sent us. All right? Colon. T. Our quote is not over with yet, so I'm going to continue with this one. This is going to be nominative or accusative, singular, neuter, accusative, neuter. All right, just means what. I'm going to find our verb, which would take this as its object if it's accusative, or would be done by this if it's nominative. I'm going to take a look here. I've got leges, and that's a second person, singular, present, active, and indicative ending. So this has to be accusative. Doesn't make sense for you to be something neuter, especially since they're talking to John. It's definitely not. You say. Okay, and then peri is a preposition. And seautu would have to be its object. It's the only word left in the sentence. Peri takes the genitive here. You've got omicron upsilon there. It's going to be genitive, singular, and naturally masculine because our subject is masculine. And this means about. And this is reflexive. So it reflects back upon whoever is the subject of the sentence. And there's a different form which would reflect back upon someone who isn't or doesn't have to be the subject of the sentence. If you know Latin, think of the words ipse versus se. Ipse is non-reflexive and se is reflexive. So se is the equivalent of this one, except not in case. All right, so this is about yourself. Question mark. Then we've got efe here, which is a new verb, which means this sentence closes our quotation, and we move on to John speaking. Efe, I believe, is our very first imperfect verb. This is third person, singular, imperfect, active, and indicative. It comes from femi, which, if I remember correctly, only appears in the present tense and the imperfect tense. And efe is, in Latin, roughly equivalent to the singular of epon. So, there you go. He said, comma, quote marks, ego, nominative, singular. I, we want to look for verb, phone, nope. Ontes, that's a participle. Ente, eremo, no verb so far. Imperative. As we take a look ahead, we have no verb for this clause, which means we want to assume a form of ami. So ego, put in ami. I am phone. Eta there is a nominative, singular, feminine. This is going to be predicate, with this being the subject. And it's voice. Bolontos here is, as I said, a participle. This is going to be a genitive singular ending. And it is present tense from bo. Pretty weird sounding word when it's in the present indicative. And active. Is it active? Yeah, I think it's active. And it is, of course, participle. And masculine or neuter, technically. Okay. And this just means of crying. But here, rather than being possession, it's probably going to be more of specification telling us what type of voice. I am the voice, a voice of crying, not possessed by crying, but the voice that cries. Okay, and then we have our prepositional phrase. In here is going to take the dative. Let's see from these sub-iotas here that is correct. And since we've got an eta in our article, we know that this is actually feminine, even though it has the omega that a masculine or neuter would normally have. So this is going to be a second declension feminine word. Not very common. All right, so that dative, singular, feminine. So far, so good. And this means in the desert, wilderness, comma. All right, so far then we have, I am the voice of crying in the wilderness. Moving on. Euthunate is a imperative. Got ate, which could technically be second person plural indicative. But here we have what he is crying. So this is, I'm not sure exactly what to call it, a quote inside a quote, not really, because it's not quoting anything necessarily. And this one is going to be second person plural. Euthun, I believe, is the aorist stem, and it's active imperative. Okay, and this one means make straight. Now, special note about this one, since it is in the aorist tense, we know that this is a one-time command. So he's telling them to do it, but only do it once. If he were to give a present tense command, then that would be do it and keep on doing it repeatedly over forever, essentially. So there's probably something intended here, like you only need to do this once and then you're done. If the intent had been do this and maintain doing it, then he probably would have used the present imperative. All right, moving on. So we want a direct object. All right, we got tain hodon right there. That's nice. Tain is naturally accusative, singular, and neuter. The road, way, path. Okay. Kuryu, got omicron upsilon there, which is a genitive, singular, and this is going to be masculine word. Of Lord, comma, kathos epein heisaias ho prophetes. All right, so we've got epein here, which is the singular form of this one. So third, singular, aorist, active, indicative. And kathos means just as said. Then we want to find if we have a subject there, which we do in all three of these words together. Since this is a Hebrew word, it had to be naturalized into Greek, so it doesn't look like a normal nominative singular. So we just have to assume that it is based on the context, because it's not going to be ho prophetes said the name. It makes far more sense that the name would be the subject of the verb. And ho prophetes is basically a predicate for our subject. So nominative singular. I'll leave it at that. And this is Isaiah. Really interesting spelling. What we've got there is a diaresis, which tells us that alpha and iota here are not a diphthong, but they're actually two sounds that we should say independently. So, Saias. So, relatively similar to the way we say the name in English. All right, ho prophetes, we've got eta sigma there. This is clearly a first declension masculine, nominative, singular, masculine, predicate. Without the verb, of course. All right, and this just means the prophet. Period. We don't know if the quote continues on from here without looking into verse 14, which is beyond our scope today. So we're going to leave it as is, and if we need, we'll add quote marks in right here. All right, so this is what we have so far. They said, therefore, to him, who are you? In order that we may give answer, we'd want to put the word in there for our sake, to those having sent us. What do you say about yourself? He said, I am voice of crying in the wilderness. Make straight, let's go with way, because I think that's what most translations do. Make straight the way, or the path. Yeah, path is better. Make straight the path of the Lord, just as Isaiah the prophet said. Period. All right, now, if you recall, when we come across definite nouns which do not have articles, when in English we would want them to have articles, we're going to take a look at the two different ways that we could translate them in the sentence and see what that does to the sentence, see which one makes more sense. All right, so first one is answer. It's not a name, so this is a bit of a stretch of our standards, but we have two different ways of doing that. I put the word an in there for clarity's sake, but we could instead say this, in order that we may give answer to those having sent us, versus in order that we may give unanswer to those having sent us. Now, clearly the one with the indefinite article makes a lot more sense here, and it doesn't really shed any clearer light on our actual concern. So that one doesn't help us very much, one way or the other. It's just it is needed here for English. All right. Could do it again with a voice. I am voice of crying in the wilderness, or I am a voice of crying in the wilderness. That one's also not going to help us one way or the other. Okay, we take a look ahead, and here we get to Lord. Lord has no article. So there are two different ways of translating this. Make straight the path of Lord, singular. Make straight the path of a Lord, implying that there's more than one. Right? Well then, if it's an indefinite Lord, a Lord amongst many, which one? What are these? Where have we seen them before? Who are these? That's questions that we would have to ask ourselves. But if we leave the indefinite article out, then it's just make straight the path, the way, the road, whatever, of Lord. We know there's only one that we're concerned about. And if we take a look at preceding passages, Old Testament, we would know that there is really only one Lord being referred to here, and this would be God. So, putting an article here could work. It muddles up the issue, as it has, I think, every single time we've taken a look at something like this with something more definite like Lord rather than answer or voice. Those two, it doesn't muddle it. It actually clears it up. But here, we know less of what's going on. We could do it again with Isaiah. But we've got whole prophet here, so that clears up that issue. Okay, I hope taking a look at verses 22 and 23 was helpful for you, and I hope that you have a good day or night. Farewell.